You know, it gets really lonely in this holodeck. Oh, speaking of which, that's better. So, I get really bored up here in the Sea of Tranquility. Alone by myself on this moon base. That's why I go to Twitter. And Twitter is full of a lot of information, keeps me up to date. Honestly, I don't know where I'd be without Twitter because there's just so much that I didn't want to know, but I'm glad I do. Some stuff popped up today. I think you're going to find it interesting. You could probably tell from the title what this video is going to be about. But let's have a look. So my friend Mars tweeted this. He says, "I have to admit, I never thought I'd see a Detrans video like this before. I am a woman with a penis." A Detrans video, not a trans video, but a Detrans video. He says, "It's amazing how alive they are now. If you haven't yet, check out some of their recent videos. I am not responsible for anyone else's perception of me. Imagine the impact this would have on the transgender community if they'd realize that." Let's have a look at this fantastic video.
I am a girl. I identify as a girl. I know in my last video I said that I didn't identify with either boy or girl, but as I've continued to go inward, as I've continued to heal, as I've continued to allow myself to process the things I'm feeling without any judgment, I've come to terms with the fact that I am a girl and I identify as a girl. And the experience that I've gone through transitioning is just a unique experience to my womanhood. Socially and in society, I am definitely perceived as a male. I worked very hard to make sure of that. But that's okay, that's okay. That's, again, just a very unique part of my experience. And there's beauty in that. There's empowerment in being myself. So I am a woman who has had the unique experience of starting testosterone and having bottom surgery and having top surgery and having facial hair. And these experiences are unique to my womanhood. And that's beautiful. They're my experiences. It doesn't make me any less of a woman. It doesn't make me any more of a woman. It doesn't make me anything, really. It's just an experience that I've gone through. This doesn't mean, again, like I said in the last video, this doesn't really mean that I am going by different pronouns or going by a different name. I don't care about any of that stuff, really. Though, like I said, the way that people see me is the way that people see me. I am not responsible for anybody else's perception of me. I'm responsible for me, and that's it. That's all I want to be responsible for. So how other people perceive me is totally fine, totally okay. He, she, they, I don't care. I don't care at all. Call me whatever you want. I said that in the last video, and I am just saying it again because this realization that I've come into doesn't mean that changes. My perception of myself is still the most important. I am a woman, and I am a woman with a penis, and I am a woman with no boobs, and I am a woman with facial hair, and I am a woman with a low voice, and I am a woman. I'm a woman.
So, this is a very interesting video, and let me tell you why. It's interesting because it's almost problematic in the same ways that we hear Alex Drummond say, "I'm a woman," but it's coming from a detransitioner. It's coming from a female to male transsexual detransitioning. So the overall message is it's the same, strangely enough, that you can be a woman and be a woman with a penis. You can be a woman with no boobs. You can basically be a woman with a very manly body. The only difference is this is someone who actually is a woman, someone who actually always has been a woman. If you aren't trans, if you're a detransitioner, you never were trans, but you thought you were trans. You were transitioning, but you weren't really trans. And I'm not trying to throw mud at this person or any detransitioner and say none of that was valid. Absolutely, what was going on, what was in these people's headspaces, perfectly real to them, which is why we should all be questioning transitions. Question everyone's transition. We see people are more focused on the superficial than even the psychological or the sociological. We don't see people going out of their way to learn how to be a man or a woman. All they care about is looking like the part, but then they act completely like men or women. Um, so detransitioners, they always were, but they've just been confused and plagued with this confusion, compounded by a lot of misinformation from allies, from counselors, from friends, sometimes family. They'll just push all of this fake news, and obviously it's done a lot of damage. So good for this man. It's just really weird. It's really weird to hear him, hear her. It's hard to turn that part of my brain off because when you perceive what looks like a male. Anyway, when you hear her say these things, it's very, very much strongly echoes the bearded trannies. It just does. It's just so peculiar. But good for her. Good for her for finding who she really is and having the courage not only to detransition, but to actually put this on video, share a testimony, share the truth. In some ways, it makes it more real. It also makes it harder to avoid. So, good for this person. Speaking of detransitions.
Hi, I'm Laura, formerly known as Fred, and I'm going to make this video now before I think better of it. My story is that when I was 16, I decided that I was trans. I'm probably one of the oldest people to have had the experience of stumbling on trans stuff on the internet and then self-diagnosed. And what ended up happening is I took testosterone on and off because I was so dysfunctional. But I took testosterone for a few years and I had 2 botched surgeries on my chest. And immediately after the second one, the denial that I had been in for the last few years just fell apart, and I was faced with the fact that I was living a lie. But at that point, nobody was talking about detransition, and I was alone with this problem, and I just started using drugs and ran away from everyone that I knew. I had spent the last, almost a decade trying to force all my friends and family to obey my rules and cutting people out who didn't. So I was very isolated. And fortunately, I didn't die, and I ended up getting clean. But now I need to tell my story because I think it could help people. I can't say that I don't regret transitioning. I do regret it. I'm very grateful that I didn't make myself infertile. I'm a mother now, and that's just been so amazing. I found out that there's a lot of women, a lot of mothers who are raising their young children as trans, and I was really horrified by that. I started to feel like I needed to do something about it, and I needed to talk about my experience. And then I just came across online, stories from other detransitioners. So I now feel, motivated to do something with this pain and maybe help some other people. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I want to let people know who have reached a point where they can't keep lying to themselves that it's possible to detransition and to become okay with their bodies, or at least most of the time. It doesn't have to stay like that. I don't even really think about gender anymore on a daily basis, even though people frequently mistake me for trans or male, even when I was pregnant, which was interesting. It just doesn't affect me the way it used to. And even though I now have a disfigured body, which is not attractive to anyone except maybe some sort of a weird fetishist, and I have health problems which are definitely related to having transitioned and which suck, I can accept my body the way it is. You know, for people who haven't physically transitioned yet, you know, there really are two sexes. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. I don't actually even feel like a woman now. I mean, I get that the definition of woman is adult, human female, and I accept that. So I accept that I'm a woman, but I don't really know what that means, and it doesn't matter to me anymore. You know, for young people who, you know, I'd say under 25, it's not possible to know if you're going to want to have children when you're older. We're just not, as humans, we just don't experience that until we get to be like in our mid-20s, and that's just a fact. For young people who are thinking about transitioning, you know, who are in their teens, you know, just wait. Just wait, you know? You can always do that later. You know, there's celebrities who've transitioned when they're super old, and that's fine too. You know, you can do that. You can give yourself a few years and then make a mature decision, because otherwise you could end up taking the future away from yourself. But honestly, you know, where I really feel like something needs to be done is this thing with the transgender children, because this is child abuse, and I don't really know what to do, since apparently talking about that is considered, you know, like the equivalent of, you know, being like a Nazi or something. But it's actually the opposite, because sterilizing people against their will is exactly what the Nazis did. And children don't have a free will. They don't understand anything. You know, if you tell children that Santa Claus is real, they believe that. If you tell them they can change their sex, they believe that. And, you know, I saw a thing online that said, you know, a transgender 4-year-old is like a vegan cat. You know who's calling the shots or something like that. And that's completely accurate. It really is. It's eugenics. It's eugenics. And I'm a psychiatric survivor. I was diagnosed with a whole bunch of disorders that I don't really have when I was a child, because I didn't fit in. And I was put on a bunch of medication, and I'm sure that that played a role in why I was so disassociated from my body as an adolescent, that I believed that I was trans. But, you know, the reality is that, you know, I'm a woman, and I'm different. And, you know, in, the 19th century and, you know, the 20th century, you know, women like me were forcibly sterilized, not just by the Nazis, but also in the United States, and in Britain, and, you know, all over the place this is going on. And then, you know, as a society, you know, we finally stopped doing that, and now it's happening again. But with this illusion, this cult of free will that says that people are choosing it. And, you know, I'm sorry, but children can't make a choice like that. They don't actually have the ability to make informed consent.
So, I liked a lot of what she said. I didn't like all the ums, though. Yeah, that was, it's really hard to pay attention when, you're always, saying, and I'm worried that the more I watch something like that, the longer I hear someone talk like that, I'm going to start picking that up myself. Yeah, it's better to say than to say I guess. At any rate, shit, I'm going to be self-conscious about that. There was a lot of good stuff in that video. She made some very good points about the Nazis sterilizing people. And that's really what's going on. When you're talking about transitioning a population, you really are sterilizing. You're putting them on hormones that are going to, well, for one, you're putting them on hormone blockers, and then you're giving them these other hormones that are going to render them infertile or impotent. Trannies get surgeries. They get orchiectomies. Obviously, they get SRS. but even before the SRS, some of us will get orchiectomies and hysterectomies, and uh, that that it's permanent. You're talking about a permanent solution, and we're talking about a permanent solution being applied to children. And she was also right in talking about how if you tell a child Santa is real, then Santa is real to that child. And if you tell a child that you can transition, you can go from male to female or female to male, that you can change your sex, the child is going to believe that. I disagree, however, about the overall conclusion. I think that as far as she's concerned, you just can't. Well, what I would say is this: as far as she's aware, there's no such thing as gender. I disagree. I think that gender does exist. And I'm free to disagree, and she's free to disagree, and I'm not going to hate her for that. I'm not going to call her, a trans hating turf. Again, I'm sure I've said this before, but turf is a slur anyway. But if you're gender critical, I understand why. I know why you're gender critical. I know how it is damaging to both women and men, damaging to their bodies, to their self esteem. It causes so many problems. So I get it. But I do disagree. I do disagree when it comes to the whole gender thing. I wouldn't say that you can change your sex, but you can certainly come close to resembling the opposite sex, assuming you don't from the get go. Some of us are blessed to have more androgynous bodies. Potentially myself as well. That's what I've been told anyway. But I think that it's important that we listen to stories from detransitioners. It's important that we learn how they came to be trans and then why they stopped. A thing that I actually regularly hear is there's the expectations from society that women need to conform to a very feminine model, and not everybody wants to do that. So essentially, we're talking about gender nonconformists reacting to social expectations. Often, we're looking at a reaction to the sexualization of young women. In some cases, we're talking about sexual trauma. And I've encountered quite a few female to male who transitioned after having been raped. And that leads me to this. Years ago, I encountered this. I thought I might share this with you. So, I don't know how you pronounce this. Canius? I'm going to say Canius. So, I'm going to click X. I'm sorry. I can't afford to donate right now. This is the wrong time of year. Everybody's broke during Christmas. Anyway, Canius was a Lapith hero of Thessaly, according to Book 7 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. He was originally a woman, Canis, daughter of Atrax. In Apollonius of Rhodes' Argonautica, he is briefly noted as the great father of a lesser son, Coronis, who sailed forth among the Argonauts. The striking mythic image of this hero is that, indomitable through his more than human power, his enemies, the centaurs, resorted to driving him into the ground with timbers. In other words, they hammered him into the ground with giant trees just because they couldn't destroy him. He was like a superhero, actually. Let's look at the myth. Canis was a woman who was abducted and raped by the god Poseidon. So, the god of the sea, who had also raped Medusa and caused her to be cast out by her patroness, Athena. After raping Canis, Poseidon was pleased and promised to grant Canis a wish. Canis was so distraught that she demanded to be changed into a man so that she might never be wronged again. Poseidon granted the switch and also gave Canis impenetrable skin. Thereafter, the spelling of Canis was changed to Canius to mark his transformation. So I think it's an interesting myth to look into. I think honestly, the detransitioners should actually consider adopting this character as their mascot, because it speaks to a lot of experiences from what I've heard from detransitioners about not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to be dominated by men, be made weak by men. They end up getting a thicker skin. In this case, in this myth, literally so. If I'm not mistaken, let me check this out. Virgil also says that Aeneas sees him, having returned to his original female form by the Fates, in the fields of morning, as he visits the underworld in Book 6 of the Aeneid. He also was mentioned in the Hasidic Catalogue of Women. So he basically detransitioned, at least in the afterlife, because he was still a woman at his core. So like I said, a great mascot. Now, there is one more thing I want to share with you, and it's a thread. So I'm going to read that thread, and then that'll be the end of this video. Hands down, the most frustrating part about the whole trans debate is the sheer absurdity of it. Like, let me get this straight. These ideologists are allowed to create an entire political movement and medical industry based on giving cross-sex hormones and plastic surgery to children and teenagers, skyrocketing in numbers of people seeking these treatments to the tune of thousands of percentage points, with no precedent, with no data, without even a consistent narrative on why exactly this practice is even necessary. Out of the blue, without even a single shred of rational, evidence-based knowledge to assure patients these treatments are safe. Actually, in the contrary, every day we get more evidence of how dangerous transition is health-wise. And I'm the one who's supposed to support my position that this is all ridiculous by pulling data about adolescent neurological development out of my ass. I'm supposed to provide data on why performing cosmetic mastectomies on 13-year-old girls could be dangerous. I'm supposed to provide data on why 8-year-olds should not be administered fucking dangerous pharmaceuticals that disrupt natural puberty. I'm supposed to be the one to provide data on how cross-sex hormones can destroy a person's reproductive organs. Why? Why? Why has insanity been accepted as decent, but common sense requires a 36-page dissertation? It's like explaining why 2 plus 2 equals 4 in a world where scientists have started saying 2 plus 2 equals 10 because 4 is exclusionary of numbers with double digits. And it's not just a frustration of debate on a stupid topic. It's frustration, rage, anger, exasperation, because I know with my functioning brain that countless lives will be so deeply, negatively impacted that I can barely even wrap my head around the damage that could be done to a child who grows up to be an adult after being medically transitioned before he or she could even spell the word transition. I know with my functioning brain that countless teenagers who are confused, emotional, desperate, with no life experience to give them hope or context for what they are going through are going to be hurt by this. Why? 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 Why do I have to explain? Why do I have to stay calm and rational and present facts to people who are selfishly destroying thousands of lives? And the people who blindly go along with it like brain-dead sheep and who forget that 10 years ago, none of these suicidal, dysphoric 8-year-olds existed. It's maddening. And I have a lot of respect for the people who are not detransitioned, who take the time to collect the data, write the articles, and present logic to people in power to no fucking avail. Because for me, it is so unbelievably painful. I just don't know how I'm supposed to do it. Don't get me wrong. I'll let this satanic movement continue over my dead body, but it's so unfair. What happened to everyone's sensibility? Where were the suicidal 8-year-olds over the last 10,000 years of human existence? Where were they? Why is it that anorexic 15-year-olds have been replaced by dysphoric 15-year-olds? Why is it? Why is it acceptable that referrals to gender clinics increased by 1,000% in 1 year? Where were the suicidal dysphoric 8-year-olds 3 years ago? Where? God, I can't stand it. It's such a loss of basic common sense. It would be funny if thousands of lives were not being destroyed. God, I am terrified for what this conversation will look like in 15 years when those 8-year-olds grow up. I really am. And it disgusts me that even rational people outside the SJW bubble can't approach the topic without dancing around the feelings of trans activists. Immigration? No filter. Social media censorship? No filter. Trump insanity? No filter. Drag queen story hour? No filter. But when it comes to shooting up innocent children who cannot even do long division with hormones that will destroy their bones, destroy their sexuality, lower their IQ, give them heart attacks and stroke, they dance around the issue like professional fucking ballerinas. I'm not saying no one's trans, but of course we have to protect actual trans people, but obviously there are real trans people, but who cares? It's child abuse. End it. Speak up. Stop being a coward, because in 15 years you will wish you weren't. That's some pretty powerful stuff. I gotta say, I got pretty passionate reading that because I could feel the anger and the frustration in this Helena, this Twitter user. I get it. I do. And I'm trans, and I'm never going to abandon that. I'm never not going to be trans. But I get it. Because unless you really are trans, and you would know, you will know if it persists, and it has to persist, if it persists all the way into adulthood, you will know. But children can't know. There's just no way. Their brains aren't even finished forming. We know that the frontal lobe doesn't finish developing until 25? Our higher thinking just doesn't finish developing. And the worst part is, as he mentioned, or as she mentioned, detransitioner, right? It affects IQ. And actually I've even wondered if my own IQ hasn't been affected by being on hormone therapy and also not being on any hormones. I haven't been on hormones for a while. I'm trying to get back on estrogen, actually. I do have insurance, and I want to start seeing a doctor, and I need to get back. I really do need to get back on hormones. But right now I've got no hormones, and that's actually dangerous. I'm actually at a huge risk for bone loss, among other things. And like I said, I think actually it's affected my intelligence. I'm not even kidding. I think that there has to be some kind of component to memory and intelligence from hormones. I remember reading years ago about how this one drug, propranolol, could help patients who suffered PTSD by making the memories of their traumatic events less powerful emotionally, and they didn't have the same kind of recall, and certainly the memories didn't have the same kind of impact. And it's because under that trauma, those memories were formed under the influence of adrenaline, and I suspect that memories formed under the influence of testosterone might be similar, maybe the same with estrogen. Maybe I'm getting into pseudoscience, fringe science, but state-dependent memory, and maybe there's something to that a little bit. Might be worth looking into, but God knows it's not politically correct to look in that direction. Certainly, no one wants to say that your intelligence is going to go down if you transition, because that might discourage people from transitioning. God forbid. It's something that you should weigh. You know, when you're deciding, do I really want to go with this transition, or do I just want to live a gender non-conforming life, which is always an option. If you can live a gender non-conforming life, if you can get by without actually transitioning, go for it. By all means, do it. Be true to yourself. Do it. But some of us can't. Some of us, it's too much. And, well, in my case, I actually took matters into my own hands and self-castrated myself. Because there was nothing I could do, put it that way. I was suicidal. I didn't want to live in my body if I was going to be under the influence of testosterone, and I just could not get the help I needed at the time. So that's what I did. But most of those who call themselves transgender under this very broad umbrella are not in that same headspace. And those are the ones I would say are not really transgender. They're gender non-conforming, sure, but they're not really transgender. And does that mean that they shouldn't be living a transgender life? Not necessarily. If they can find a balance, if they can find a healthy balance, by all means, more power to you. Far be it from me to tell anyone how to live their life, as long as they're an adult. If you're an adult, you can make an informed decision, well, you can make any decision you want, but it's better if you make an informed decision. And if you don't, well, part of that would be on you, because you really should do your homework. But then part of it is on the TRAs and even the community at large, because the community at large, a lot of it is TRAs. It doesn't seem to want to share certain information because that's discouraging. And the trans community is all about encouraging others, for better or worse. They tend to ignore the latter part. Anyway, obviously I'm going on a rant, but detransitioners are people I very much respect, and I think it's very important to hear their stories. Absolutely. Especially knowing that as the population explodes, especially among our youth, especially among female to males, we are going to see a lot more detransitioners. And it's very important that we listen to their stories. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found some of it informative. I know I learned a lot by watching these videos. And I'll see you all later.